spaceships. It's not about spaceships. It's not about spaceships. It's not about spaceships.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Ward, and you're watching the Making Star Wars show. Today, I have my buddy here with me, also named Jason. Jason and Jason on UFOs. On the show in the last week, we've been talking about UFOs on and off in between Star Wars talk. On Twitter, I talked to my buddy Jason here, and UFOs always come up. How you doing, Jason?
How you doing? I hate to argue with George in the intro, but tonight it is about spaceships.
It's about spaceships. Yeah, it was pretty funny. Like when I was making that intro, I had like all of these funny George Lucas clips that I got, and that was one of the ones I was like, this is kind of funny because everything is about spaceships, George Lucas. It's all about it. So I'm gonna put that in there. But yeah, I mean, you and I have just done a completely amazing talk off camera without anybody showing up yet to talk about spaceships.
Yeah, like we have a passion for Star Wars. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we have a passion for kind of, I think, the unknown and what the possibilities are out there. And I think that those things are very similar in nature.
No, it's funny because they are. And it's also been completely offending me because like I have like a friend who I love dearly, but he will be a contrarian to anything. He doesn't even care what his real life position is on things. He'll just be a contrarian. And he tells me, of course you're going to like, because you like Star Wars. And I'm like, yo, I've liked Star Wars like my whole life, but I did kind of give up on the UFO thing when I was just like, it's like God. Does God exist? There is no answer. No one will tell me. No one will prove it to me. Show yourself. Show yourself. And like nothing would happen. And so finally, when we started in around 2017, when I think the first baby bits of disclosure kind of started, it was 2017-ish when we started to get kind of like TikTok videos and things like that really getting confirmed and stuff. I was like, okay, I had one toe back in. And then as we moved on and moved into this Lou Elizondo area with like A-Tip saying, I did this stuff. And then you're like, okay, there's something here. And then now the government is confirming, well, yeah, this stuff's real. We don't know what it is. Here's a report. And you're like, I was both elated by the report and angry at the same time. I'm like, both like, thank you. And also like, more. And I know that they said this is
that's the world of ufology, my friend, or even paranormal investigation as a whole. You know, you have those questions and rarely ever get any real answers. It's interpretive for the most part, right? Until more is released by a public, government or a private government agency rather. It's up in the air. It's like you said, like a belief in a higher power. I'm not getting any confirmation from the other side. Science isn't confirming it. Yeah. I guess I'll just have to believe it. And I think that does fall a lot into, ufology. It comes from a belief within.
Strangely what, in a weird way, and I'm going to explain it poorly, but in a weird way, I started watching, what's the guy's name? I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he has a YouTube channel. It's like Answers with Joe. And he covered the double slit experiment, like a quantum mechanics kind of thing. And it was like talking about how like when something observed, which is like measured, like how it will make a light pattern will be like an interference pattern, or it will be random depending on if it's being measured. And it was almost like conscious, like almost like in a weird way, proof that consciousness has an effect.
I have heard of this.
Yeah. And like when you go down the rabbit hole of it, you'll get a lot of new age people that are misunderstanding what observed means in that field. And they'll think it just means looking at it in some way, but it has more to do with like measurement and stuff. So it's kind of there, but it was enough where I was just like, wow, like, so maybe this is a simulation, or maybe it's like a video game, and the world renders by what how we understand when we are observing it, and maybe there's more to all of this UFO stuff in terms of like how traveling at the speed of light. Maybe it's not traveling at the speed of light. Maybe it's literally folding space. Like maybe it's all of these weird science fiction ideas that real quantum theorists are dealing with right now.
Yeah, and I've talked to some friends that are, in the science field and stuff, and I always bend their ear about my questions concerning UFOs and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
It's funny if it's not in one of their papers or, put across their board at a college or something like that, they're willing to talk about it.
Right.
The second that it's in any type of professional light, a lot of times they'll pull back or be hesitant.
Right.
It's funny because, I served in the military for many years. I'm retired now. But when I was in there, I was stationed in Alaska, and there's a facility known as HARP.
Right.
And, as a person into, conspiracy theories and paranormal stuff, I of course have heard of it. And I actually became friends with one of the guys that was one of the main people that ran that facility.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up becoming friends with him and talking about it. And it broke the illusion of what you read online and what reality is. And then kind of riding that fine line of, so there's nothing to do with weather or anything. It's like, no, it's this, but it's something else that's kind of interesting about it too. Mm-hmm. Right. So while the conspiracy theorists are trying to make like, hey, what's this in Alaska? It's weird. They totally miss the focus of what that thing does. And there's an interesting part of that that facility and what it has done in the past. So,
right.
But it put into perspective on how to look at things and to always, not believe anything and everything right out the gate, even if it's coming from a high up source like Governor Ventura, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that. You right. gotta be discerning with your evidence, with your information, and everything else. I did want to say hello to everyone in chat there.
Yeah. We will talk to everyone in chat and talk about your comments and stuff like that too. So by all means, while we're having a conversation, do not feel like you can't use the chat and that we will overlook it, because I didn't plan on talking about it yet, but I like Rick Jones's comment that angels don't play that harp. But so I was gonna say, yeah, like, not to make it all about me either, but just like to bring it to the stupidest version of things. Nice shades, by the way.
Oh yeah, we got an MIB thing going.
We are, right? Yeah. No, like I've read conspiracies about myself in Star Wars spoilers, and I can tell you that no one ever got anywhere near right. They simply had like this like limited data and went down a rabbit hole that was utterly batshit to me. And it was funny, like me and my like partner would just look at it and just crack up laughing, like, these morons, like they just like see this little pinpoint of somebody's life or this thing that's happening, and they try to figure it out. And that's what, like, in the weirdest way, made like UFO stuff so hard for me, or so hard to like deal with before now, because if the government won't share anything at all, there's just no way to ever get to the bottom of it unless you have a personal experience.
Right. And I think talking to actual witnesses or reading witness, I don't get to talk to many UFO witness abductees. I can, however, get from a reliable source their interview or something like that. And I like Travis Walton's case. I love like dissecting his actual interviews, moments on camera, all these different things to then gather an opinion on it. And of course, you have to, again, discern it heavily. And that will sometimes lead people astray, and they'll start, chasing that rabbit down the rabbit hole. I think a lot of intel for the military and government, they know that. That's what they don't need. They don't need Men in Black anymore. Right. They do that stuff on the computer. If they want to discredit someone or plant anything or intimidate or whatever it is, they'll do it on the computer now. They don't need a person knocking on the door.
No, and when it comes to that stuff, I wonder how much of that gets in the way of the possibility of full disclosure. Like when you hear these stories about like that one dude out by Area 51, I think, who they were like hiding pieces of metal out in the desert to make him think that he was picking up wreckage. And they like one of
Oh
the
no, you're talking about a different guy, and it wasn't Area 51.
Okay,
but yeah. The one Richard Doty was kind of stringing him along and kind of lying to him and stuff like that. And
yeah, it's like when you have stuff like that, like how much like does the government open itself up to just being sued out the ass?
No.
Or do they not? I mean,
No.
but does that get in the way of, because I mean, when they do really horrible things to people, and they did, like when they go and they say Lou Elizondo never was a thing at ATIP, was never anything at ATIP, and then they're like, oh yeah, he was. It's like, well, for a time there, you really discredited that guy in the public eye and made him look like an asshole when he's completely an American patriot when you get down to it.
Yeah, I mean,
like it's ridiculous. But how does, and I'm glad in that, who was it, Harry Reid or something like that, who stood up for him and said like, no, this guy's real, thank God like that happened, or we might not be as
they did the same thing to Jesse Marcel, right? And my experience with the Army is, guess what, folks? I loved serving. I'm a patriot. I would serve again, and I would recommend people to serve. However, there are things that at times I believe that they will, sometimes throw people under the bus to get what needs to be done.
Right.
They did it to Jesse Marcel.
What's the story with Jesse Marcel?
He was the guy who first investigated the crash site at Roswell.
Okay.
And then of course they were like, hey, you got to go talk to, the general up at headquarters. They flew him to headquarters. And then, the general listened to his story and was like, hey, from this point on, I'll be the one doing the talking, right? And he goes, come on in. And so they went into a room, and it was a room full of reporters, totally caught kind of Jesse off guard.
Yeah.
Him, like a good soldier, they're asking him questions, they're stuff like that. And Jesse Marcel said, all I could do was sit there and, be quiet.
And he's the guy who you can see that he has like the telegram in his hand.
And that's the thing is they had him hold up the weather balloon pieces because he's like, what's going on here? But I know he is thinking, as a military man, if I do the right thing, if I shut my mouth, I know that this is something huge that I've stumbled upon, and it will help me in my career if I do the right thing.
Right.
And instead, they made him the biggest patsy the world has ever seen, right? Like, hold this. Hey, this stupid guy screwed up, everybody. He's dumb. And he said he suffered throughout the rest of his military career, kind of. He was an officer. He was doing good, and that's what happens, is sometimes there's a bottom line, and if they have to just chew up people like bubble gum to get the job done, I have no doubt in my mind, as a vet, that at times the military will do that, and that sucks. But
I took some.
There's a bigger focus, and that is the information that comes with all of this, if true. Right?
Yeah, no, I took some Cold War studies courses for my outside stuff in college, and I remember my professor saying, like, the U.S. lying about the U-2 spy plane was one of the first times that Americans knew that the government would really lie to them. And then you have Vietnam, and like you look at both of those two kind of incidences, and then you get to the 80s when you start to see Roswell coming out, and that's when Roswell, it's like people were ready to believe, oh yeah, this could have happened.
No, it's true, because in the 50s, it was pie in the sky. America is the best, and gosh darn it, we still are, I feel. However, I think at times, there's other people that can outshine us in certain areas. But I think as a whole, we're the greatest.
Being
that's
the
just
best
because I'm American, right? Yeah.
But it doesn't mean, being the best doesn't mean that there's never room for improvement.
Exactly.
And that's the thing about these governmental agencies. Like Lou Elizondo has been pretty freaking clear that there are a ton of heroes behind the scenes that are totally unsung at this point, who are trying to get full disclosure and trying to get us there, and that you have a couple of essentially bad apples who want to maintain the status quo, what they've always dealt with. And then you also have the other side of it where you have people with a certain supernatural worldview who are like, well, clearly those are angels and demons, because if I confront this in any other way, my belief system for me crumbles.
My theory on that, you know who that is right there?
Mm-hmm.
I hate to be an ageist, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Boomers. They're boomers. They're the people that have that just no ability to take any of this information and kind of make sense of it, besides reverting back to their original upbringing of religion, you know? And is there some, you know, plausibility to that as being a thing? Possibly.
Tom DeLonge saw it that way before he was detained.
Yeah.
Like if you listen to, and I've always like, I wish I could talk to him for 5 minutes, not about Blink-182 whatsoever, just about this. I'm like, because
he'd be like, hi, I'm Tom DeLonge. I'm like, man, I'm a huge fan. Oh, you like my songs? Don't know one of them. Maybe a couple, but yeah, no, we need to talk about UFOs.
Yeah, because I mean, before he was detained, or it says he was detained for a couple of days by governmental people to basically interrogate him about his knowledge, he was saying things like his interpretation was that he was told that these are essentially almost like angels and demons, and that it like, and stuff that I was a little bit like, okay, that's a supernatural worldview interpretation. Maybe they like to like feed off of negative energy. Like, and he was saying stuff, and I was like, okay, I guess maybe it sounds a little bit new agey, kind of hard to rationalize for me. But then he said the one thing, I think it was on the Joe Rogan podcast, where he's like, so a physicist, or it's implied a physicist that works for him to the Stars Academy, said, when you get into the craft, into one of these UFOs, time slows down on the outs. Like everybody outside is moving in slow motion. And I think his example was you could literally like move a Coke from somebody's hand into another person's hand. And what I find so fascinating about that, and he doesn't bring this part up, but just like in a weird coincidence, I was curious about the speed of light and how aging, you know, and how it works and stuff. One of my favorite Queen songs is this one song called 39 that sounds like it's a folk song, but it's about the year 2039. Mm-hmm. And the character goes at the speed of light, comes back to find a new world, but everybody he loves is old and dead. Just, it's a rad song. And especially
I'm a huge Queen fan. So
yeah, so when you figure out, you're like, whoa. So anyways, me and my kids were talking about speed of light. So I started researching it, and I learned this really interesting little tiny fact. And it's that when we send satellites up to space, we have to write a software patch, because when they're going 17,000 miles an hour up in space, time is relative. And so in that way, they end up losing about a second every year. And if they don't write the patch, then the time and the clock and the whole system of the satellite is screwed up, is off. So they have to write the software patch. And so why is that? It's gravity, it's speed, and it's that relative time difference. So what he's saying makes a big, huge, it makes sense if you are getting into a craft, if element 115 is real, and that you are essentially radiating it and making an artificial gravity field, then now time is completely relative in that way. And so like, I want to talk to Tom DeLonge about that. I want to talk to Tom DeLonge about how did everything change? What changed for you? He says after he was detained, he basically couldn't sleep for 3 days. He was told essentially the truth, and it blew his mind. And the stuff he was saying before that was wild. And so I'm like, so clearly he learned something else, and he probably can't talk about it, but it's like, what the fuck? Know, sorry to be crass.
Yeah. And you know, I respect Tom and honestly what he's done with the field of ufology. Yeah. You know, people laughed at him. People made fun of him. He sounded like a crazy freaking idiot on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan sounded like a jerk to him, you know, but in the end, what Tom was saying was because his mind is right now overwhelmed with a lot of information. He said in the past, you know, talking, of course, Lou's hinted about it. Chris Mellon's hinted about it. Tom's hinted about it, that, you know, maybe they're not coming from space, right? Maybe they're out of the realm of infrared that we can't see. That relates.
Yeah, he
That
always
relates.
talks about Wi-Fi. You can't see Wi-Fi. We
Can't see
discovered that.
Wi-Fi, right? But
Yeah.
with certain devices, we'd be able to see all this and stuff like that. There's something called the unified theory or unified paranormal theory of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And John Keel, he was a UFO investigator.
Oh,
so
Tower.
Yep, the Tower. He talks about this and the spectrums of light and the kind of the different dimensional possibilities where we could be overlaid on top of other dimensions, and some of these things can cross over and go cross back, and we may not be able to see them, but sometimes they can show themselves to us.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, however it is. I do believe in that a little bit because, people always say, oh, why haven't we ever found a body of Bigfoot? Maybe he don't live here, friend.
Right. Yeah.
Bigfoot people don't like hearing that. But if you hear about some Bigfoot cases, it's associated with UFOs. Right. And here we're already dropping down this rabbit hole real fast. Okay. So bear with us. This is going to be a crazy night. Okay. So there's a book called Where the Footprints End. Okay. And it talks about the correlation of Bigfoot sightings and other paranormal evidence that has been gathered through witness testimony and story that does not hint to them being just a large unknown primate type human in our woods. It hints to dimensional, being able to see through the Bigfoot, having them all of a sudden go invisible, almost cloak themselves like the predator. Weird stuff like that, So I believe that UFOs may have the technology and this possible evolutionary branch of humanity in a different dimension may have the technology to come into our dimension when it wants. And I think there's, a lot of things like we see in videos where UFOs can't really be focused in on that much, or they're hard to catch, or Bigfoot's blurry, and all these things are weird. Yeah, your camera's not fitted to see something in that spectral light. That could be, right?
Right.
I leave that open for a possibility. Anything's possible.
Yeah. What we're seeing could be interdimensional beings, might not be. And if those aren't, it doesn't mean that if we weren't to start to look, that we might not find life in these other spectrums that we never thought or never even knew existed.
So I'm going to pose a question to you, Jason, real quick. Okay. Here's a scenario. Okay. Our planet right now is reduced to maybe a few thousand, 100,000 individuals. Okay. We have genetically basically inbred ourselves to the point where it's just causing all sorts of anomalies. We have to essentially, right? We have to essentially, reproduce in a test tube, not natural, the fun way. Right.
Right.
Hey, I want you to get in this machine that we have, and I want you to go to another dimension of our planet and link up with possibly our human race that obviously has evolved differently, but they still have the same strand of DNA. And I want you to go and harvest some of that for us to then rebuild our population. Can you do that for me? That sound good?
Let's do it.
This could be exact what's going on, right? Like craziness.
I've heard. I mean, and like I don't think if these are crafts piloted by beings, you have to be open to whatever it could be, and that's what's difficult. Is that like when we come out of this like Star Wars background, you don't want ghosts and aliens, for instance, to conceptualize it and to boil it down to its dumbest essence. You don't want them to be the same thing. They're not. No, aliens and ghosts are different. My pop culture mind has told me that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to deal with maybe there is interdimensionalities that we don't understand and that we are discovering, you start to go, oh, wow, maybe there are things coming through and they are these things. And maybe this concept of ghost isn't that some guy died. Maybe it's something completely different that's just living in the
timelines overlapping on each other. I'm not a physicist.
Wild stuff. Yeah,
I can't do my taxes. I go to H&R Block like every other, horrible at math person.
TurboTax.
But I can see through science fiction, right? And the stories that we've had in pop culture, the possibilities. Look at Loki.
Mm-hmm.
They're dealing with it right now, very heavily.
Yeah.
This multi-dimensional existence and how it's not that bad, guys. It's not that different, not that strange.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, Spielberg had us looking at aliens and UFOs in the 80s, and it was hinted at that he kind of was pushed along in E.T. to kind of push a message. Maybe Marvel's doing some of that similar stuff. I don't know.
Indiana Jones uses interdimensional beings theory for their aliens.
People hate that movie, and listen to me, folks.
Yeah.
It's still Indiana Jones. I don't care what you say. I will still love that movie. I will just maybe look away when Shia LaBeouf's on film. That's it. And then afterwards, all good.
Yeah. No.
And that jungle scene, I will look away and cry. But I will look back because it's Indiana Jones. They kind of got the interdimensional aliens thing.
Yeah.
Years ago.
If you haven't watched that movie recently, it's a fascinating watch today. It more than it even so when it came out. It's like, whoa, who was talking to these guys then?
I think it's George, Stephen, and of course they have writers helping them with their scripts, as you know. But I think that they've been tied into the paranormal and fascinated about the subjects themselves. They can't not be. Look at Stephen's films. Spielberg's always had that thread in there.
But he later in life moved over to the Neil deGrasse Tyson side of things, where he's like, if they were real, I think we would have better footage by now. And then I was always like, he's not wrong in that point. Like that is a good point. But then you start to hear once again, Elizondo going like, I think it was Elizondo who says that there's like stuff maybe as close as 50 feet away.
Sure. I think there is.
Yeah.
Is it going to be something that you see high HD resolution on? I don't know. Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
I would love for the government to have shown more of this stuff, because if they don't know what it is and nobody knows what it is, then it needs to become a world project. Like where everybody's working on it. Like we have to have, like we always, you'll see like little projects. Like remember on the PlayStation when you could turn your PlayStation into, you could have it like do processing stuff in the background while it was off to like help organizations trying to cure cancer and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's we have a world of digital cameras now and stuff like that. Like we could be utilizing this all to crack if it hasn't already been cracked open. And I think
they know that though. They know that everyone has a camera. I think they know that their time is running really short to where something like, if anyone knows about the Ariel school, sighting in Zimbabwe with all the children. Right? Phenomenal case.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with it, you should definitely. There's a new documentary about it that delves into it, and the raw interviews are pretty much available on YouTube now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's these children, and they're just like, I think they go out to recess, and a UFO essentially lands. They say, and that an alien gets out. I think it's like the bug-eyed alien, but with hair. I think they say.
So there was 2 to 3 beings cited by the children. This is over 100 children. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of them indeed was reported to have like some kind of stringy black hair. The other 2 weren't described with hair. They were described as having kind of stiff necks. So when they turned, it was like the Batman, our Batman, Michael Keaton.
Michael Keaton. You mean
right.
the real Batman?
Yes. The real Batman.
The real Batman.
You know, and these things also were described, which I find fascinating, leaving the craft itself at times just a little bit. And when one of the children saw this thing run, he said it was like he was disappearing and then reappearing, disappearing and reappearing.
Yeah.
What's that tell me? That tells me it may very well be dimensional.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like there is some component to that, because there's like aspects of it where I'm going to just quote Elizondo constantly in this, and hopefully I don't misquote him and put anything in his mouth he didn't say on accident. But he talks about how like the crafts will, when they're above water, really close to it, they will actually disrupt the water below them.
You know,
it's like,
and Bob Lazar talks about that kind of field around the craft, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about Bob Lazar and his heart field. I thought it was extraordinarily, almost poetically beautiful that it was like a little heart on there. And I'm like, oh, if these are friends, that's so sweet. Because it's like the field is literally
intentional.
Yeah. But symbolically, is that why is this our mythology? Are we relating to this? But yeah, so Bob Lazar, I mean, he's such a fascinating character, and even whether if you believe him or you don't, fascinating character just as a human being.
Yeah.
But that all that said, like, his story is essentially that he was working on a craft that he calls the sport model, and it was an alien, perceived to be some kind of alien craft, but he says it was found, and this is where you're like, what? And then that there were 9 of them, and that I think they were from an archaeological find, is what he says.
Not all of them.
Not all of them, just the one he was working on.
He didn't even. He said one of the craft.
Oh, okay.
I was told was found in archaeological.
Yeah, that's wild. And then so he basically, essentially, his wife starts to have an affair behind his back, as humans do, not just women, but people. And he starts to have the affair, and then the brass at the base, or whatever, S4, I think it's called, okay, his home life is about to get ripped apart. We don't know if we can trust him. We don't know about the stability of this man. And they start to ask him out of the projects. And then the guy, as I think, how old is he about this point? Like 28, 29 years old?
Yeah, he was, I think, around their late 20s.
Yeah. So like any dude will do, starts throwing kegers at the base and taking people to watch test flights, I think that's how the story goes. And like,
he brought an RV at one time.
Yeah. And they have like video cameras, and they're filming, and
like, see, I told you I'm not fucking lying, guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And like people, I've heard people who don't even get along anymore and hate each other, don't turn on each other on the stories. The people who attended, who went to these things, they say, no, this stuff happened. And I could tell you, even when things go right or go wrong, you'll have people who are like, no, it was a lie, just to be awful.
Rick Jones in the comments section says he's flip-flopped about 4 times since finding out about Bob Lazar in the 90s, believing him or not. Let me address that.
Yeah.
Rick and everyone else. This is my theory on why Bob's a hard pill to swallow, okay? Bob came from kind of a wild background. All right? Bright guy, scientist, right?
Right.
Said he went to this college. All of a sudden, later on, we can't find his records. That's easy explanation, folks. I'm telling you, that's an easy thing to do to someone.
Is that everybody lies
for the government
on their resume?
It could be, or it could be he got deleted, like his social security number and everything else did.
Yeah,
I'm guessing that's probably it, right?
Los Alamos. They said he didn't work there, and there's proof that he worked there.
In his story, he talked in the early years about taking a piece of the element.
Yeah.
Right. And all of a sudden he really got hemmed up for that. His house was getting raided.
It happens during Jeremy Corbell's documentary about him,
because they started talking more about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. He started talking about it, and they were listening to him enough that when he said that, he got raided by, I think they say, 4 different governmental agencies.
Right. I think he has changed some of his story. And I think Jeremy kind of knows, even though he's such a, the guy that's in the middle of the circus, what do they call him?
Ringmaster?
The ringmaster, where he's loud and boisterous and loves, but he's passionate, seemingly so, about his work. That's Jeremy. And all due respect to Jeremy Corbell, he does great, I think.
Yeah, I think he's fantastic.
He just really hypes up stuff that maybe he should kind of put out with a temper, but
I felt bad for him the other day when he released a video and it worked in conjunction with another video. At least, did it work with 2 videos or just one other video?
I think one other video.
Yeah. And I accidentally thought it was the other 2 videos, but it was just one of the other ones. But it's just like he's further confirming something that's and anything that you wanted to debunk about that one is now turned on its side when you look at this. And it's
back to Bob.
Yeah, back to Bob.
I don't want to let Rick down here. Back to Bob is, I think that he's had to change some of his story to hide and convey the fact that he had an even bigger plan with his whole, hey, y'all better not kill me or do some shady stuff, because I am smart and I'm going to have a backup plan, and it's going to be to reveal this element, 115, if you ever hurt me. It's already in the process of, people know what they need to do or whatever. It's in a will. I don't know how he does it, but he's smart enough to have a plan, right? And I think there's parts of his story where he's like, I don't want to talk about that. Oh, hey, Bob, you talked about element 115 having a piece of it. I don't want to mention this. And people are like, see, he's lying. No, dude, he's not lying. I think he's just smarter than you give him credit for, because that dude's a genius. Like, legit.
On the flip side of it, just to play devil's advocate, it could be a bluff. He could have worked on element 115. He could be saying he has it, and if something was to happen to him, the kill switch kind of moment will happen, and then
that's a good point.
They don't know if he has it or not, and that might be why they've raided him, because you would think
it could be.
And then I've also wondered, like, what if, and this is just me and not trying to discredit or credit Bob Lazar because I don't know. What if when he started saying it, because like I've dealt with just the stupidity of Lucasfilm and Disney together, and the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing half the time. So you could imagine what the government's like. And it's like, so sometimes I wonder if they're like, well, what if he does have it? And then that's just all that it is, but that's just me.
That's a powerful weapon, and good on him.
Yeah.
In the early days, that's why he came out with his story, was to protect himself.
Right.
Because he did know a lot, and he was starting to expose people to certain things that he knew he wasn't supposed to. And they threatened him. They held a gun to his head at one point, he says. And how he describes, by the way, this government, entity handling this scientific type stuff,
right,
is all very compartmentalized, and no one's talking to this. The right hand's not talking to the left hand, like you said with Lucasfilm and Disney, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I'm telling you, that is how the governments ran.
Sure.
Okay. Like that happens all the time. And I could totally see them taking a very top secret project like that and handling it in that way. Right. And good on him if he had that plan to come out with the information to protect himself and put himself in the public light. And then now further into it, I think that the government is worried about people like Bob from the past and the things they've had to do to cover up the possible truth. They're worried about people who have gotten radiation sickness from exposure to UFOs, maybe are UFOs that have been used. Maybe not. Either way.
I saw this story about this woman from Texas where it's like a kid and a grandma and a mom. Mm-hmm. This one, and then they did pavement studies on it and did kind of conclude that the road was paved over where that that sighting had happened before, and it's just like, what the heck is going on with that stuff?
Yeah.
And there's like elements of it where like Elizondo has pretty much, I feel like, without confirming it, has confirmed through his winks and nudges that these crafts are probably telepathically controlled, and the Bob Lazar story is essentially saying as much. Like, there's no buttons, there's no controls, there's just a little tiny chair for a very little Yoda dude, and that's where you kind of end up at with these things if you believe Bob Lazar stuff and you interface it with Elizondo stuff. And so that's where I get down to like, okay, if that's the case, how were they doing the test flights that Bob Lazar was watching? You know what I mean?
He said he only saw up close and in person one test flight.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And even the test flights that they witnessed out in the desert with his friends, you know, it wasn't like extreme. If you look at these test flights, I remember watching the old VHS, like kind of bootleg copy of what Bob's videos showed.
Which
and
is hard to find now today, by the way. Super hard to find. Like, weird.
It's just a light in the sky and it's going up, it's going down, right? Here's what he said when he saw it up close at the S4 site, when he was brought out by his boss to observe this. Literally, he saw a pilot go in there, right? And all of a sudden, it lifted off, hovered for a little bit, and then kind of just settled back down.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Doesn't seem like a lot. Unless you look at what Corso and anyone else who's looked at the actual technology from the Roswell crash, and if you believe their story of what technology was learned from in that crash, this vehicle could very well have been piloted by consciousness and the ability to imagine yourself moving this craft and meditating almost and concentrating with deep effort, the ability to take this. And if you look at a lot of UFO videos and the way these things move all crazy, so it's almost kind of like someone's having to concentrate on moving this thing. And that the ones out in the desert Bob was showing his friends, I think it was very early testing of like, okay, how high can you go up with it? Okay, can you move right? Can you move left? Can you move this? Can you move that? I think it might have been a continuation because clearly they had one in operation, right?
Yeah.
He was working on one that wasn't necessarily operating until that test flight. I guess it was fully functional. There was others that rather weren't fully operational.
Right. And what I find fascinating about this is, like, we were briefly talking about, like, when you get down to the sort of science snobs who want to say, like, oh, if the aliens or craft from another planet came here from another dimension, we would be ants to them. They would be so far, they wouldn't even care what we have to say. And it's
then
like,
why the hell would they concern themselves with whether or not jamming a radar is an act of war?
Right. Well, but where I want to take it is, if we're able to climb into one and we're able to interface with their technology and make it go up, down, left, right, and whatever, they're not that far beyond us in terms of the evolutionary process. They may be hyper intelligent, but if we can use it, because I could tell you right now, we could give a dog all the milk bones in the world. It's not going to drive a car.
Not until I get my Tesla microchip in my head that helps me do other stuff, right?
Right.
There's evidence that has been put forth by documents, whether real or not, that during alien autopsies, it was looked at as these things could be androids, right?
That's what I've heard.
More machine than man.
What did Corbell call them? Techno something. He had some word for it. And it was like essentially that it sounds like, in a weird way, I'm a big fan of the singularity. I believe that the singularity will come if societal collapse doesn't hit us first. And when that does happen, if you were in a society and you do hit the singularity and processing power gets there, you are going to essentially become somewhat immortal through technology and nanobots being able to replace your blood and repair your heart and whatever needs to happen to you, and could live hundreds of years, if not thousands, if we were to hit that point. And so if you have another society that only started 1,000 years ahead of us, they would, if the singularity is supposed to hit in 2044-ish, well, hell, even if they're 200 years ahead of us, they would have hit the singularity, for instance. And if that society has, then there you go. Like, and that's one of the things, is that like the singularity is and I know that sounds far-fetched, but the singularity is as big of a problem or as big of a hurdle we have to start to contend with as a culture and society in the world as we do UAPs. And clearly these beings, or these interdimensional beings, or whatever they are, have hit it before us is all. And so I have no doubt that if they are like when you just look at the physiology of what we look like compared to what they're supposed to look like, we have, their brains appear that they would be much more advanced, and there's probably a hell of a lot more going on there, but maybe it's not that crazy. And it's like, I like when they say, maybe we're not mankind, maybe it's mankind's, maybe it's plural,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a fascinating kind of concept. And that's why I hate it when you hear, pop scientists kind of on TV really discrediting all of it. It really bums me out.
Again, I think that mainstream science is hesitant to put any type of actual, say in the conversation, because they have been so institutionalized, the science academia, that when something is brought up that isn't covered in a, peer-reviewed paper, you're going to be discredited.
Sure.
Because they've done it to scientists. They have discredited them, pushed them out of the field, just on the point of, think this is lunacy. You don't have anything to prove, even when they bring evidence forward.
There's a book by Kuhn, Keuhn, I believe, and I think it's called On Scientific Revolutions, I want to say. And we had to read it in grad school for American Studies, even though it wasn't science. And the reason was that he details how whenever a new paradigm is on the horizon and it begins to creep into a field, and in this book it's science, essentially you have the people who want to hold on to, the Earth is the center of the galaxy, and then you have the new people, and then it's a whole big upheaval that has to happen until it washes out, and then they go, this is undeniable, and the truth settles down. And basically it's that, according to his theory, basically every field, this applies to most fields and most things, whether it's American Studies or it's science or biology or whatever. And so what we're kind of seeing there is you're seeing defenders of the old guard, of the old scientific beliefs. And and it's like, in reality, we need to be going, okay, this stuff is real. Science needs to stop pretending like these limitations exist when they don't. We got to figure shit out.
I think science just needs to admit they don't know what the hell's going on for real. They need to stop claiming like they do. Yeah. Because honestly, what they know is just a drop in the bucket. They need to be a little bit more humble. Right. And if you talk to a scientist for real, on an individual basis, they'll be a lot more open, personable. The second they get together, just like the rest of humanity, they become egocentric and judgmental and cliquish, and all those things start. So I think science needs to look at itself and how they conduct their business in the future, because going forward, I think that they're going to have kind of a slam the door effect when this stuff comes down quicker than they think.
Well, like, what's going to happen? Like, so I'm almost going back to an earlier point, an earlier part of the conversation. But
yeah, we're all over the place with stuff.
It's like, what happens when you have the next Phoenix Lights and everybody has their stupid phone and they could see all of it, everything about it. And it's like, there is no doubt, like when that happened in 97-ish, like some people who were more well off might have a camcorder. But when that happens today, the next incident like that, it's going to be so fucking documented.
That's why I
that,
said about the aerial school.
Yeah.
Imagine all those kids and all the phones and TikTok and how quickly it'd instantly be live,
and
they couldn't bury it.
And it's going to discredit science. It's going to discredit the government. And like that's one of the rumors that you hear is that like a lot of the people who want disclosure is because they're afraid that they don't want to be the ones. I think the analogy is they don't want to be the ones in the musical chair standing when everybody sat down to.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if they don't get on it, they don't start, giving us, because in reality, it's like if you're just in the grocery store and somebody starts talking about the UAP report or whatever, like I've had that happen where somebody's like, "Hey, you seen this? That's crazy shit, right?" And you're just like, "Yeah, it's wild." And then it's like they're usually the common person's, in my experience, the common guys like retort is like, "But of course, aliens are real." Like we've grown up with Close Encounters, and we've grown up with Bob Lazar even by proxy, and shows like Sightings on Fox in the early 90s and all the stuff and most people to some degree, most people aren't like, I don't believe in it. Most people are like, yeah, I think it's totally possible. It's rational that it exists. I think
that they're really trying to wait until a lot of the, the millennial generation is basically the ones that are, at the top. I think the boomers, they're expecting to start dying off. And at that point, I think that we have more of a possibility of getting more shocking information. No offense to the older generation, it blow their dang minds.
Yeah. No,
because they've had so much longer in a world where that wasn't even a respectable thing to talk about or even think about. We've had Star Wars, we've had E.T., we've had everything from our youth until now to prep us. They didn't.
Yeah, my grandfather was married before he started the branch of the family I come from. He had like a whole other family and then remarried like in his 40s to my grandmother, and she did too. And then they had my parent or my dad. And they were a bit old for even to be my grandfather at the time. It was a great dude, but he was like the most patriotic dude ever.
Of course he was.
It was like both at the same time, one hand beautiful, and on the other hand infuriating by how just like unable to contend with anything that everything had to be right. Of course, no, they wouldn't lie, like no matter what. But even towards like the end of his life, when we would watch like some UFO, I could watch TV with them or something like that. We watched like some UFO stuff.
Horse shit.
No. He started to come around. And he'd be like, JC, I think maybe there's something to this stuff, and that's like where he was coming at it from. But that still, there was still sort of an ingrained, I don't want to say brainwash because I don't mean to down talk him, but it was almost like programmed societally to behave in this certain way. And then that has been stripped well away, like mass media. You kind of like, in a way, like reality usually starts to, and sometimes make its way out, and the truth doesn't stay buried for too long anymore.
Here's my conspiracy theory on this.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
What news started covering this topic first?
Oh, I have a conspiracy theory about it that I see that every freaking time I look up UFOs on YouTube, it's Fox News trying to get me to watch one of their videos.
Fox News' age category?
Oh yeah, but I also feel like that their end is more predatory in that it's about watch this UFO video so Tucker Carlson could start to tell you about some other bullshit,
fear.
Yeah.
I'm very progressive. I don't watch Fox News unless it's got UFOs on it. And when it does have UFOs on it, I leave it at that. And I'm like, all right, bye. But I will say that all the news media is all kind of controlled by the same entities. I mean, it's all very, very well orchestrated. And just as a nation, look at any other nation and the way they conduct their media. You know, it's It's all what it is. I do believe, though, that Fox News was the first right out the gate to start really dipping its toe into this and really talking about it. And now I got my grandmother and great aunt blowing up my phone like, honey, did you watch the news? You know,
Right.
my grandmother's unfortunately passed last year,
Oh.
but due to COVID, but you know, they're starting to talk about it, the older generation, and they never were given that kind of permission to think outside the box in that way. And I think that that is intentional, that they need their generation needs to, you know, have that understanding, or unfortunately get timeline needs to go up more before we get actual more information.
Yeah. It seems like with
I tried to say have a whole generation of people die. It sounds horrible when I say that, right? But
it does. For them, it was really kind of regulated into the Time Life Mysteries of the Unexplained book series, was about where it started and stopped.
I had that, by the way.
Yeah, I loved it. All the old people had it. You go in their house, you go to the bathroom, you're like, well, now I have some literature. But
before phones, kids.
Before the phones, when you had to just be like Reader's Digest, huh? I guess
shampoo bottle. Son of a gun. Yeah, Rick Jones said censorship is real. These topics were off limits. You were laughed at. You were told, you know, I remember being young in our generation. We grew up with E.T. and V and all these science fiction things. But like, honestly, even then, as a young kid looking into the actual ufology, actual cases, I'd get laughed at. Like, how is that? You know, I just never understood that. But yeah, culturally, we have evolved in that aspect, I think, to be able to ask these questions and not show so much ridicule until you're on a top tier level, right? The higher level in you know, the mainstream news and Twitter with mainstream scientists. That still happens.
No, and that's why, regardless of anything, even like of Elizondo's past work, where I'm like, you know, like Guantanamo Bay, and then you're like a little bit like turned off by that.
I will tell you, like Guantanamo Bay, what happened there was atrocious, but not everyone working there engaged in that behavior, and there, you know, and stuff like that, you know.
No, and it's not his necessarily his fault or whatever. But I will say, when he goes to ATIP and sees that this information is not being passed up, and that it's sort of just kind of everything that they do is dying, and if I think at one point he estimates that only 10% of UFO encounters are reported, and if that is true, there's like 14,000 a year or something like that, based off of the data that's available, and if that's true. And so when you start to get into that, I think maybe it was 1,400. I'm not sure, but I don't want to say it wrong, but I might be. But when you put all of that out there, you're like, that dude is awesome for coming forward. I mean, I saw an interview with him a couple of days ago where he's essentially not taking money for coming out with this information and by bringing this forward. And he and his wife were living in an RV at one point because of the sacrifices that he's made to bring this like truth out. And I do hope for him. I don't think that's the thing about like Bob Lazar too, is people have a problem with people making money off of it. I don't have a problem with him eventually making money off it after he's done his part. And it's just like Bob Lazar's selling his artwork now, and I want to.
Is he really?
I sell him for like $90, I heard. And like
from Bob Lazar or from someone else?
No, Bob Lazar is doing the drawings and selling them himself.
This on Facebook, because I can't.
I want to say I want to say it was on Instagram.
Oh,
I could be wrong, but I if he's still doing it, I want to get one. I don't mind. I don't mind that. I don't think it's we live in a capitalistic society, and people got to eat. People got to pay the bills.
People got to eat.
And like, but at the same time, like that guy, you know, forwent his pension to go and bring this info to us, and that's like.
Well, he did retire.
Yeah,
he retired. And he retired as Sergeant First Class. So I can tell you, he's fine. You know, got retirement. He's okay. But I know that he wants to do more work in the future with his training that he's received, because why not carry it over? That's what you do. That's why he wants his security clearance to be good still, because he wants to, still be able to do what he does.
Right.
And if he doesn't do anything else, well, shit, that's what he's been doing for the last 20 years. That's a waste, right? But like, I understand where he comes from, and I think definitely he should be able to make a profit off of this and not have people judge him for that. If he writes a book, and is able to convey new information that maybe he wasn't in the past willing to convey. Right. I think that's what he's afraid of, though, too, is also he doesn't want his retirement turned off.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to be brought up on any charges of, this and that. He doesn't want to give them, frankly, the benefit.
Right.
Because he played their game. He played it by the rules. They didn't want to listen. And he knows how to get around those rules. And I mentioned this to you before in our conversations. Mm-hmm. He knows how to do the dance of top secret information talk.
Right.
He knows how to handle that like it is a fencing match, like it's a duel. He just goes in there and he knows what words to select. He kind of, if you catch his interviews and multiple interviews, you'll see he has certain phrases that he reuses, and people are like, "Oh, it's scripted. He's said this before, and this is how I know he's full of shit."
No, he has a lawyer.
No, he has Sheehan, right? That has to back him up, and he himself knows the game, and he is trying to get information to the people, right? Because he wants them to have this information. However, he's not willing to put himself in a position to where he himself is going to be all of a sudden the victim of the government because he said the wrong thing. He's going to beat them at their own game. And that's what Chris Mellon is doing with him. They're playing this by their rules and they're winning. Mm-hmm. Thus far, they're getting the information out just like they want.
Yeah. And he's been like super clear that like there is sort of like phases to this, and that there is a point when he has to step away and he's trying to start the conversation, because at some point, he won't be able to say anything more because everything will be classified. At the same time, when you watch all of that dude's stuff like together, and somebody on our UFOs did like a note of a bunch of his videos, like the stuff that he has in there. I mean, there's like wild stuff. I saw one of them where he basically alludes to the fact that Roswell isn't the first crash. The first crash was in Italy.
I don't believe it was.
Yeah, he says it's in. At first, he doesn't say where it is, and then he's all, it's Italy, and he says it's in Italy. And then after World War II, they give us the craft to us, and he's seen like documents and evidence from other governments that seem to indicate that happened.
So the one in Italy, I remember finding where it was. I don't remember the exact. I want to say it was near Sicily. But yeah, it was in Italy, and and that was something that was hinted at through, I think, a very light source in the past in books or something, like someone has seen it in paperwork or something, but it was never talked about ever. And he's like, yeah, there was crash before Roswell. It was in a foreign country, right? Which means the foreign countries are in the know about this.
Yeah.
And
it implies a secret space race essentially around this stuff.
Yeah. If you get a hold of this power, if we find out, folks, listen to me and listen good. Listen, if we find out that this is a Russian or Chinese or whatever technology, you need to go and you need to get, I forget the Duolingo, and you need to go ahead and download those programs and start learning that language immediately.
Because
it's over.
No, it's like if that was the case, it would have been over so long ago. But at the same time, like when I take Tom DeLonge's words and if I treat them seriously, it is sort of a nightmare scenario in certain, as fantastic as it is. Imagine right now, you and I have the craft. We can now go to any country we want. They're in slow motion to us. We can tear it up. We could take down world leaders. I mean, and if the slow motion stuff is true, it explains alien abductions, and you could just like literally just destroy the world in a matter of days, and just tear the whole fabric of societies apart and rearrange them to whatever you are able to make them into. And
is there any precedence for saying that they're willing, as a species, as an offshoot of humanity, or another dimensional being, are they willing to do that?
Well, like Vermont Mike says, Professor Hawking always said to not communicate with other beings as we won't like what could come. And like, fair enough, but clearly they've found us first, so we are already there. And in a lot of ways, I am optimistically looking at it from the sense of that it, based off of what Tom DeLonge says the crafts do, they could have already eradicated everything about us and taken us back to a pre-feudal state even. Yeah. And they haven't. And in a lot of ways, I fear us having that technology a hell of a lot.
I fear us having it more. Yeah.
Yeah. And
we that's where don't give it to us.
Yeah. And I'm like, but at the same time, I know that if it exists and it's possible, we're going to, in a societal collapse isn't there. The aliens or the beings or the crafts, the UAPs, they do things like shutting off our nuclear missiles, but then in some instances they've turned them on. Mm-hmm. So like over here, they've turned them off.
Yeah.
And over there and in other countries, I think Russia, perhaps.
So from what I understand, Lou's also talked about this. I think alluded to it. I'm not sure his statement exactly, but the fact that seemed like they were kind of instigating a reaction.
Yeah.
And all these sightings that we had in the 50s came about, from the first atomic bomb being tested. After that, it was doors open. Let's go look. Before that, it was here and there. There. Maybe they saw this place as a vacation. Hey, let's go look at the people that are primitive. Hey, cool. Hey, guys.
Yeah.
And then you had, of course, the first atomic bomb, and all of a sudden, a flood of sightings. You can't just write that up to, well, it's because it was in the news and people were making stuff up. Maybe it was in the news and they started looking up.
Yeah. Like I saw this guy. I think it's called Concrete. I want to say it's called Concrete. It's a really good podcast with a K. I think it's Concrete. Sorry if I'm getting it wrong. But there was I like the host of it. The guy's pretty cool. And he had this guy on who was drawing parallels between sightings of owls and aliens, right? And like, I found it fascinating just onto itself. Like, what does this mean? And there were kind of times when like it looked like maybe they were actually owls, but they were maybe aliens, and they're putting that memory back in people's heads. It's like it was down a rabbit hole that was bizarre. But I started just to like look at it pragmatically, and I'm like, you know what? You see an owl flying in the sky, you look up and you're like, look at that owl. And then you're like, oh shit, it's a UFO. And like, so it makes sense that you might have that connection between like UFOs and UAPs, or owls and UAPs, so to speak.
If you look at my Twitter, you can find me, by the way, at Pemberfoot on Twitter.
Yeah.
Just earlier, I took a nap and then I started browsing Twitter and I looked at some of my photos in my camera and I'm like, what are these? And I saw like a series of like 6 or 7 photos.
Yeah.
I had no memory of taking, and that were beside, or like on the side of a road out in the country. It's the road that I go and pick up my kids at their mother's house, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's Hicksville. And in the picture, you can see something in the sky. There's a series of these on my phone I had no recollection of taking. Who the hell knows?
Yeah.
I don't remember taking them. You know, my girlfriend's like, maybe the kid was taking photos with your phone. I'm like, no kid touches my phone.
Yeah.
No, that's not kid property. But who knows, right? Like,
have you heard Kurt Russell's story about
yes,
the Phoenix Lights? Like, yeah, he was. You'll hear in the Phoenix Lights incident that it was one pilot who reported it, and it wasn't until years later that he sees like a documentary that Goldie Hawn is watching, and he's like, "Oh, that was me," and then he goes and looks at the flight logs and he confirms that it was him who.
Yeah,
he was the one who.
It was him and his son, but not the one that was in Captain America.
But it's like one of those things where a lot of people, if they do have a paranormal or an incident, it's like, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do about it? And they kind of go, okay. And then they like move on. And like, you'll hear that a lot when it comes to people who have like these profound, I've just been in the stuff I watched, you have these like profound kind of moments where they could never let go that what they saw. And then the person who they were with lets it go almost immediately. It's like, yeah, I remember that we had like an experience, but it just, and it's fascinating how the human mind works.
I've had 2 ghost sightings in my life.
Really?
Yes, and I had 2 UFOs. One I can talk about, and one while I was on active duty that I can't really talk about.
Yeah,
it's not because you know, oh my God, there's a huge cover up. It's because it was tied to top secret stuff, and it was nothing, you know. I think that was.
I'm just going to tell the story. I don't care. I'll out you right now. He was picked up by a UFO full of babe bots.
Oh.
And it was like Austin Powers. It was wild. I mean, you should hear the story, but he can't tell it. So.
Unfortunately, folks, I can't tell you that story. But you know, I've had weird stuff happen in my life that honestly you can't really explain. I found a Bigfoot track that Cliff Brockman from Finding Bigfoot, before that show came out, he interviewed me and investigated the photo I took, and that the situation around that photo and the night I spent with my friends, soldiers in the woods, you know, was weird.
Yeah.
But I move on, right? It's like you said, you have these weird experiences, but then you're like, okay. And you move on.
Or you go full Richard Dreyfuss with Mashed Potato Mountains.
But you know, how many people actually do that? For real? How many people really do that?
Like that one dude. What's the case? The dude, I think it's over in England, who with the symbols we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Like he touches the UFO, and then he writes out binary code.
Rendlesham incident. Yeah.
That's I want that to be a movie.
But what did he do after he wrote down that code?
That was his Richard Dreyfuss thing. Is he felt ill, like he felt not right, and then he had to write it away. And he did it. He wrote it down and closed it up. And then, as the story goes, years later, he's like talking about the symbols he drew, which are really rad looking, and then he goes and somebody's like, "What's that?" And it's like binary code, and it says that they're human. Or that they are from the year 8000 and they're just studying humanity or something like that. It's real chill. And it's like, and if that's the case, you're like, wow, it kind
exploration of humanity.
Exploration of humanity.
But that doesn't mean they're humans.
No, it doesn't. but it does. Yeah, it does say like year 8000. Right? The year 8000 thing is what makes me think that like you go that way. And I like how that narrative lines up with singularity thinking.
I believe that. But the thing is, you don't hear a lot of that part of the story.
Right.
When people talk about Rendlesham and how important of a case it is, they leave that real big portion of the story out. Why? Is because it goes, and what's his name? Stephen Greenstreet from The Basement Office. Great show. Loved
that
it.
Show. Yeah.
Loved it. Right. But Stephen, what's he say? That's a bridge too far. You know, that's a step too far. I'm not willing to take. Right. Why? Because he's not ready to accept that type of truth, if ever.
No. And I want them. That case is fascinating. And somebody said, like, you know, the binding of the book was old, but it doesn't mean that the paper is. And then like, there's like, it could have been written later, but there's ways of testing. But there's ways of testing that.
And he said, come get it if you want to test it. You want to test it? Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and I wish somebody with the money to do so would get that tested, because if this dude in the early 70s?
It was in the early 80s.
Early 80s?
Yeah.
If this dude was out, writing this stuff down, and that, like, yeah, let's verify it, because that's a fascinating story. And especially now that we're to the point where essentially, like, UFOs are real is out of the bag. The cat's out of the bag. So the big part of stories like that now isn't, are UFOs even real? They are. It's did what he say happens happen.
But you're still going to have, they left that.
Sure.
If you notice, they left that interpretable.
Yeah.
They didn't come out and be like, ladies and gentlemen, UFOs are real.
Sure.
They didn't say that.
But knowing them, that is what it said.
Yeah.
That's not me wanting it to be the case. In a lot of ways, I think about this sometimes. I'm like, yeah, I do. I want to know. I want to know all of the truth. And on the other hand, I'm like, is everything better if that's not accurate? And I'm like, in a lot of ways, like, everything changes, and that's scary. And it might be better if that's not the case. I do want it. I do think that humanity could use being humbled, in the sense that of going, nationalism is in a lot of ways stupid. Nationalism can be, it is, when there's reasons to be proud and there's reasons to be, by all means, but at the same time, like, humanity should be our first concern.
First focus should be us
people.
As a planet, right, everybody?
Us as a planet, and
right,
people.
everybody? Oh, water's separating you? Oh, you have disagreements? Oh, man.
Yeah.
We're tribal as a species.
Right.
We're tribal.
And so if we could get into, like how does our conceptualization of everything change once we acknowledge the fact that we're not the only people who exist? And while racism already looks dumb, it looks even dumber. It's still dumb and still exists, but it looks even dumber when you go like, oh yeah, there's like, it's like you see a racist act or person existing today, and you're like, what a fucking idiot. But when you put it in Star Trek, it looks even more ridiculous.
Like, imagine a character that was like, I don't like this species.
Yeah. Why is there a person of color on the bridge? It's like, that's your fucking concern. There's Klingons, dude. And then Star Trek takes it one step further and puts a Klingon on the bridge. But it's like, yeah, great, But they're here to get me again. I live near a fire department, so I get a lot of.
I live on a main road too.
So it's like in a weird way, I think it might be positive, even though it's completely like frightening in so many ways. It's like,
going to be a shock. Like Lou said, it's going to be take a step back, really have a moment, have a few days to think about it, be somber. Isn't that the word he used?
He said somber. Somebody asked him, they would be like, what is the mood going to be? And he said somber, but not in a sad way. No, just in a reflective way. In a, like, it's time to acknowledge some heavy shit. And that's like what that is. Like, when
the government's always said the reason, we know that, if anyone, they mass panic and stuff like that, Project Blue Book, right, determined that if anything was determined to be true, that panic would ensue and people wouldn't, go to the work and do their job and whatever. Yeah. Would it be like that? I just saw in a Marvel movie, half of humanity get snapped away. Motherfuckers still went to work.
Yeah. No, I mean,
would react the same. I think it'd be a huge revelation, like a shocked moment. We'd talk about it for a long time, but we'd still carry on. Just like when we have weird events in our life, we carry on. We are meant to do that.
It would be like a bad breakup with reality. The reality that we knew we've broken up with it, and now I don't know what to do with myself, but I gotta go to work. I gotta pay the bills. That would not happen. That is,
you'd have that trust being broke too.
Yeah,
the government, and that's what I'm telling you. That's why that UFO report was from 2004, the Nimitz incident, and up. Why? Is because they don't want to talk about the past. We can't
Yeah.
really talk about it, guys, because they know they kind of fucked up in the past.
Because they fucked up, and also at the same time, like right now, if you just go in this direction that we're going currently, you don't have to acknowledge any alien bodies if there are alien bodies. It's better to parse this out into like it's a lot, like, to use the breakup analogy again, it's better to go, there's some problems. I don't think we're going to last. I don't think this is going to work. And then it's over. And like, that's essentially how we are going to be dealing with the current conceptualization of reality.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier than blindsidingly going, well, we got the bodies. There's UFOs. Everything you thought about science is bullshit. And well, I don't know what we're gonna do now, but if we were to go to war with them, we look fucked. And is your God real? I don't know. Who knows anymore? And like it's a hard one to try to keep a society glued together.
Yeah.
So I don't blame them for coming to the conclusions that they did in the way that they did,
especially in the 50s.
But
imagine the revelation in the 50s.
Yeah. At the same time, it's like, no, we're not that weak. Humans are completely flexible.
Are they though?
I think so.
I'll just point out the fact that stupid mother people were in my Walmart refusing to wear a mask when science clearly points to where maybe a mask is good, guys.
Sure.
Let's help prevent, right? And they couldn't accept that. And who's the majority of the people that?
But those are people denying their reality. They're just straight up denying reality.
Yep.
So people who deny reality, what can we do about that? There's nothing you can do about that. What I'm trying to say is, when push comes to shove, we're survivors. I believe.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, when it comes to like protecting my kids, making sure that things for my kids go right, things are going to go right. I will fucking make sure they go right no matter what.
Short of the planet blowing up.
Yeah.
Or the sun overheating us to the point where nothing can survive on this planet.
We'll become mole people. We'll figure out you know what I mean?
I believe humanity would survive by going to space or whatever.
Yeah. No, definitely. And so that's where I think that their analysis of our psychology is a bit too narrow. But yeah, I mean, and you're right. There will become UFO death cults. I mean, shit like that, there already were without the truth coming out, of course. But stuff like that might become way more prevalent. And I think the scary part about it is that if there are, like, let's just pretend like there is no true communication other than a sort of like, I'm flying up and I am acknowledging you kind of stuff. And that's all that there's been. Maybe there has been bodies, but maybe there's been no, hey, I'm from the future, or hey, I'm an alien spaceman, or I'm an engineer. Maybe if that hasn't happened, then you have a society that has questions that they need answers to, that they have to start asking, and then they're not ready. There is no answer. So then UFO death cults might become more of a thing, for instance, because I have the answer. There's always some charlatan who's willing to throw out that they know something. And that's what, like, they have to prepare, I think, society, culture for.
Well, what's going on right now in ufology? Right now we have two camps. Lou Elizondo, you know, and Chris Mellon, and the missions they're doing. And then we have Greer and the CE5 movement, right?
And there was a controversy with that this week too, right? Where they had somebody discrediting Elizondo, and then he's like, I didn't say that.
Yeah, Greer came out with a new documentary. Did you get to watch it at all?
No, I didn't watch it yet.
You need to watch it because it made me very angry and disgusted. Because this guy's talking, and Greer, if nobody knows, is all about the aliens are peaceful. We're the ignorant ones. We need to just stop, lay down all our nuclear armaments, you know, and understand that communicating with them would be, achieving a higher status of humanity.
Right.
That's a good message.
I love that message.
I love that message.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a documentary and then smear Lou with what looks like smear campaign tactics from a politician, and I'm going to put in a bunch of stuff that really I don't need to back up in any way, shape, or form. It just sounds asinine. Like the way he delivered that movie, it was really poor. So people are calling him out on it, that he's, pushing the CE5 app and making money off of it in that way. And, I'm all about making money, but man, at the bottom of that documentary, it was right there. Like,
wait,
hey,
roll
get
back.
my app.
Is that that idea that you can do this meditation exercise and summon UFOs?
That is. And you know what? It's a theory that I actually think is plausible, especially if these beings are, using consciousness in a bigger way.
DeLonge is on board with that, and he's all, but you don't want to do it. It's not good.
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
Yeah,
Ouija boards kind of stuff. Are they good? I don't know.
Yeah, right. Ouija board, they do. Yep.
Like some of the, maybe sometimes it's good, maybe sometimes it's not. But yeah, Tom DeLonge says that when you do an equivalent of that, they are these probes or whatever that are just waiting to be accessed mentally. And when we do it, we're pulling them down, but we're not supposed to. They're not ours.
I think that's probes from them.
Yeah, they're like
that
some
they pull down.
It's something that is theirs, is the UAP's equipment. And when these people are doing these meditations, that they are accessing it and bringing it, but it's not. We're not supposed to play with it.
That's interesting. I've never heard that theory, actually.
I want to say he's also said that on that Joe Rogan interview.
I have to watch it again. It's been like a couple years, I think, since he's been
it's
on it.
way more interesting to watch today with the stuff that we've gone over and stuff that we've learned. Mike Poppins says, I saw UAPs at the beach this evening. I see them all the time, becoming the norm now. It's so odd.
And people are like, I see footage of people at the beach shooting, these lights in the sky over the ocean. And people are like, they're just drones. Who's flying a drone over the ocean like that?
Yeah, and
dude, in the dark. No one's doing that.
Yeah, and without going into like too much detail, like I have somebody close to me who was until like this last year a drone pilot, and not like a hobbyist for the military. And when I asked them about this stuff and some of these things, the answer was fuck no, that is not something that we use. That the things that we're seeing,
does it bug you that from what we're gathering with this information being released and stuff, does it bug you just a little bit that space travel isn't exactly how it would be in the Star Wars universe? Like clearly it's nothing like what we thought it would be. It's something very time oriented, and
I'll totally admit, like I have these pop culture biases, and is it biases or biases? Whatever. I have them, and like for instance, the idea of like Skinwalker Ranch, fascinating.
Are you watching that show, by the way?
But not entirely. I watched
God.
I watched the Corbell documentary that was on Amazon Prime.
Great, watch the show. That's out.
But I have to confess that there is a pop culture stupid part of me that is like ghosts and spaceships don't go together.
But really? Like, is that how you can't wrap your head?
No, but I figured this out. I didn't really think about it. I'm like, why are you so turned off to like the Skinwalker Ranch concept? Or why does it just kind of in a weird way irk you? And it was like my vampires and my werewolves don't fight in my pop culture. You know what I mean? Like, and it's stupid. It doesn't make any sense about why but I find like aspects of it. Like when I watched I think it was Jeremy Corbell's documentary on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a story in it where the ranchers are talking about how like these bulls are their bread and butter. If anything bad happened to them, geez. And then all of a sudden they look back and they're gone, and they're all in this sort of trailer shed kind of mobile device, like metal shed, like little tiny thing that you could never get them into as bulls. And it just happens. And then when I watched that, I'm like, Tom DeLonge's little thing about the UFOs being in everything being slow motion outside makes complete sense in this kind of scenario. If you have any ability to move anything like in that way, it starts to make like a lot of crazy sense.
You
And
know, I mean, magic, is what high technology would look like.
It's how you interpret it when you don't understand it is
That's
magic.
Right. Magic.
And I saw the other time when, to go back to your Bigfoot stuff, Elizondo, somebody asked him about Bigfoot recently.
Oh,
and
really?
He said, yeah, and he didn't have like, much to say on it, but what he did say was one time it might have been Skinwalker Ranch kind of related. I don't know for certain, but he was basically saying that Native Americans say when you see one, like something is off. It's not a good sign that you do see one. And it means something when it's almost like, I think he said, and I'm quoting this wrong because I didn't intend to talk about it, but it was like he basically said it's sort of like an omen of some kind. It means something like with your family, and it has like this, and that's how like they interpreted it. But they've always had that idea in their mythology, or in their shamanism, or however however it should be viewed. And so there's like all of the stuff where you're like, yeah, this stuff could all completely link up, but it doesn't mean that it does. And so I end up
I believe in the universal, theory of, being a thing with the paranormal. I believe that that's a thing. Look into that, because it'll make more sense of everything that's going on, and not in a light way, in a scientific way. It'll kind of be like, oh, okay.
Well, no, it's always been on a weird place for me. Not to make this all about me again, but it's like I've had girlfriends who I completely respect in every single way as a person, as an intellectual, and they're like, yeah, like I've seen ghosts, and I've had premonitions, and all this stuff that like links into that, and I've always had to go like, I'm going to separate that from the respect of this person, because I don't know what to make of it. I don't know how you, and it's one of those things where I have never been lucky. Maybe it's lucky or unlucky, depending on how you want to view it. But I've never been lucky enough to have an experience that I could chalk up to being completely paranormal. Like the only thing I have is like this weird dreamlike state memory of being like maybe 2 or 3 years old at my grandmother's house that was in an elderly community where people died all the time, and sort of an angelic woman coming and waking me up and going, come on, like, let's go outside. And I never have dreams where I'm in bed, by the way, and waking up. So that's what makes this one weird. And she takes me outside, and she like points to this, like these plants in the front garden. It's like, just enjoy this is what she tells me. And I'm like, okay.
From that day on, folks, he started smoking pot.
Right.
He did not look back.
Yeah. No, it was like flowers out there. And then as and they were like, I don't know what they're called. They're like just like white fluffy flowers. And my grandmother used to let me go lay in them. Like as a kid, they were like really nice, and she just thought it was cute, so she would let me lay in them. But that's like my one memory that I'm like, was that paranormal? Was that a dream? Was I in a weird REM state? Like, who knows what it could be?
What are dreams, right?
Yeah. And like, that's all I have. Like from there. And I always look for UFOs. I've never been fortunate enough to like see one. Me and my daughter one time were looking up, trying to find UFOs, and we saw something so high up that it was just like, you could barely see it. And her and I could both see it. My son couldn't see it. Maybe his eyes aren't as good for far away vision as us, or something like that. And we were like, what could that be? Because like the airplanes don't usually fly the aircrafts usually don't fly that high above where we're at. And then, but we were never like, that's a UFO. We know for certain. But it was always like, But that's like the most that I get is a and I definitely want to see something, so that way I could.
I think you need to allow yourself to be vulnerable enough at times. I think honestly, I might encounter so much weird shit in my life, and I don't claim to be any type of sensitive. I don't claim to be any type of contactee or any of that horse shit. I don't label myself in any way besides, I can tell you, I've seen some weird shit, like weird shit. but I've moved on from it, and I think that maybe because at times my imagination is so high, I'm into playing D&D and Star Wars and geekdom and writing. I think that my mind is open to it and accepting it. And I think that you have to at least be accepting of it as a real thing before you even start seeing it. Maybe there's a switch in your mind that gets clicked on when you are like, there's no doubt in my mind UFOs exist.
Yeah.
Maybe I see them once in a while because I know they're there. I believe in them. Maybe that's it. Maybe I've elevated my consciousness to understand that.
And that's why I appreciate the disclosure from Elizondo and from even that report that didn't give us enough but gave us something, because like I feel like when you put all this stuff together, it's just it's so clear. It's yeah, it doesn't go. It says in the thing that we don't know what they are, and also there's stuff like I thought.
That's it. That you say it didn't give a lot. The fact that they've said in the report we don't know what these are. That's huge. Imagine I looking back at the field of ufology, even a few years ago, that would have come out like it would have been huge. But if you notice, we're slowly getting inundated to accepting this easier, accepting the information easier, and understanding it and moving on.
And not to get like too political, but when you look at like the last 4 years where we had like a tumultuous political climate, and then we had this crazy sickness and all that stuff that's happened, like we are kind of to a place where it's like if you were ever going to slip in some more reality, we're already like not really clinging on to how great it's been. So I think we're a little bit more open to some of that. And I think it's a little easier to like take. Now, what do you think about Matt Tueen's comment?
I think all the recent released UFO footages are a subtle way of letting China know what we're capable of. I'll address that. I think that the footage of the Tic Tac is nothing to do with us. I don't think that's anything that mankind, has created.
And that's 2004, right? Us. That's 2004. So look at how long ago that was.
Yeah. I think though, us not coming out and saying, hey, by the way, this is unknown. I think it leaves the possibility open for China to think it might be us. And that's a good thing right now. Mm-hmm. Sorry, if we can make them think somehow, some way, hey, it might be us. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good thing because we have used information to kind of go against, go work towards us instead of against us.
And
I work both ways.
Yeah, but at the same time, to like look at it like in that light, like I've never been in the military, so my understanding is completely abysmal of things other than just general politics. And I go like when you look at like MAD, the mutually assured destruction with nuclear missiles and all that jazz, like it's almost like we're kind of already have hit a stalemate on so much of that kind of stuff too, that like you don't really need to like just do like, oh, we want to fake them out that we have this stuff. It's like, well, we're already to a place where nuclear missiles will end everything anyway. So actually a hot war with China,
but
a hot war with Russia,
is a be deal, right?
And that would delivery, sure,
make delivery a huge thing.
In under 30 minutes or less, it's free for sure. In that scenario,
instantly, that's weird. Can't stop instant, so that would be a huge deal, right?
For sure.
But what else we got?
So I liked Darth Del Rio. Who would have thought Coast to Coast AM is the most trusted name in news? Laugh out loud.
I love Coast to Coast AM. I grew up on road trips, being able to stay up late. You know what I mean? In the back of the station wagon, and having it just be me and my stepfather listening to crazy AM radio, and that's how my introduction to Coast to Coast. I read all the books that were in my library and in my school and public library, but I never heard of a radio show dealing with this stuff. It's awesome, and Coast to Coast, man, they got some wacky stuff on there,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Art
Me and
Bell, rest in peace.
Art Bell was rad. Yeah, me and a friend used to swap tapes where he would record Coast to Coast and I would record Dr. Demento. And it would be like one side would be Coast to Coast and one side would be Dr. Demento, like whatever was on the 90-minute cassette. We used to just pass that back and forth like all the time. So Mike Papa says, I don't know about George Norrie, but Clyde Lewis.
Just talking about Coast to Coast AM. Yeah.
Rick Jones, Art Bell, rest in peace. Yeah, he is the best.
Yeah.
And then Rick, censorship is real. These topics were off limits.
Rick put that in there when we were talking about the 50s and their kind of inability to even talk about this stuff with any type of credit.
Yeah. And then he says to join UFO Twitter. I read UFO Twitter and I read our UFOs pretty much. Those are my like daily, like what's going on with the UFO.
Yeah, I always search engine #UFO Twitter. Look, see what the latest is.
Star Wars X UFO. Yeah. And Tyler says, hell yeah, late night UFOs. Yeah. I mean,
so let's touch upon what we wanted to talk about originally. And we've talked about privately is how we feel disclosure. Let's say disclosure comes further and how that would affect cinema, Star Wars, storytelling, is all of a sudden Star Wars films looked at like, God forbid, xenophobic,
right?
Is it looked at like old Hollywood movies in the past that had blackface and very racist, things in it?
Or what if, for instance, like, let's just pretend for a second that what if we do have signs maybe that we don't know about, but the government does, that these guys aren't that great for us. So, when you look at the 80s and you look at like Rambo and, he's going to Afghanistan and then he's fighting the Russians in Rocky and Rambo. And you have like, does it start to play on the pop culture? And then if we don't know, is it going to radicalize how that's dealt with? And like Star Wars, for instance, my take is that we might, like, if you look at the the High Republic stuff, it's sort of very American in that it's about the frontier. It's Jedi on a new frontier, essentially going out and exploring what the hell is out there. And before we started to hit this UFO kind of place that we're in, that was kind of regulated to the novels, and so in a way I could kind of see that becoming way bigger in the pop culture. I could see stuff about the frontier, even the American frontier, coming back to be dealt with, to look at how did we, sort of, if you want to look at, I don't know how to put it right, but white people weren't that great to the new people who they encountered in
so you can flat out say horrible.
Yeah. And so like in that dumb that horrible contest, white people won and it was bad. It wasn't humane. And so do we start to deal with that more in Star Wars?
I think we're always going to deal with it until it's not an issue, but we're always going to look back on it with the lessons learned. I think that, Kiksogu says, that's a great question. Thankfully, Star Wars is more fantasy than hard sci-fi. And I agree with that, right? I've always said, people are like, oh man, you want to watch a sci-fi film? And I'm like, I'm not huge into sci-fi.
Yeah.
And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, not huge. And they're like, you like Star Wars. Star Wars isn't sci-fi, bro. It's fantasy.
Yeah, no, it's, and that's what's funny is like when you look at Star Trek in the 60s and Twilight Zone and Planet of the Apes and the real big ones, they were dealing with social issues a hell of a lot harder though than Star Wars did. They were more, while science based, they were looking at humanity clearly, like and trying to contend with our ugliness at times. And Star Wars is always had the ability to be like, you know what, we're fantasy, we like genre, and yeah, sure, Buck Rogers is cool, and Flash Gordon's cool. Also, cowboys are cool, and all the stuff like that, and like you could see even in certain ways where like when Anakin goes and he slaughters the Tusken Raiders, which is not supposed to be a proud moment for anybody, but as it was brought up on the show a couple of days ago, it's like Padme forgives it right away. But when you get down to it, that was a cowboy slaughtering Native
I heard
Americans.
your statement when you said that. I'm like, yeah, he's
Rob.
right.
Rob said
what
that.
Kind
Rob
of,
made it.
what
Rob
kind of woman is she to just blindly hug him and be like, you know
what?
Feelings.
You're hot. It's okay. but it's like, yeah. So like it's gonna. I feel like it maybe is, well, it's like on one hand it feels like this stuff is still going to be a ways away, like the pop culture needs to kind of catch up to history or to where we're at. On the other hand, though, like you bring up things like Loki, and to even another extent even Rick and Morty isn't sometimes dealing with these things way quicker and way faster than we're seeing it, in like the real mainstream, which Star Wars is about as mainstream as it gets.
Yes, it is.
And yeah, and like, so yeah, it kind of like, I keep thinking about it. I keep like, I'm watching it now, and I'm almost watching Star Wars from this perspective, trying to figure out like how.
Just 10 years ago, the whole topic in ufology, multi-dimensional, kind of really wasn't tossed around much at all. Right,
Mr. Jones,
until last until last few years. Honestly, you've heard it mentioned here and there. Keel mentions it, but now it's more and more a thing, and now you're seeing it in our pop culture storytelling.
Right.
And yeah, Star Trek's gonna have to add Grays to the cast. Hey man, Stargate already been there, done that. Check that out.
Right.
So,
and that real Stargate program, what? That shit's wild.
Yeah, I have. Are you talking the guy that worked in the Stargate and had communications with the alien?
There was like a remote viewing program, and I believe it was called Stargate. I saw I think it's a declassified document. I believe it's real. I could be wrong now, but because I haven't looked into it enough. But it was basically like how remote viewing works and how to do it, and using meditative processes to get there. And then there's like other wild reports too of like, there was like this, I don't know how credible this stuff is. It's like stuff like cotton crosstalk, and it's like supposedly like there was like a remote viewing session, and I think like 7 remote viewers were supposed to catch this like Russian thing that they were trying to look into, and instead
nuclear
UFO.
submarine.
No, they saw a UFO. This is the way I heard this one story.
So they were looking originally.
They were looking for the submarine. Yeah,
they were looking for the nuclear sub, and the location of where it is offshore.
Yeah,
and as they did so, they did find it, but they also found over it a round disc-shaped craft observing the sub, and so that was a wild story, right?
But one last anecdote before we go back to what you asked is that, like, I wanted to talk about on the show, is that story that Lou Elizondo talks about how they were shooting, like the Navy was using test guided missiles or something like that, and then they go to retrieve the shell, I guess you call it. I don't know what you call it, but to retrieve the bomb that didn't explode, or the missile that didn't explode, and they shoot one and it just gets sucked down or something. One day, like a month later, they go back, they're doing it again, and they have the frogman, which is the diver, and he goes into the water, and he's in the water, and he starts panicking, like, get me the fuck up. And it's because a saucer is like coming up. And
I didn't hear about this case until you told me. Yeah. Fascinating. I got to research this and read it. Because that's amazing, especially if Lou's talking about it now.
Yeah. It was. He's talking about it in one of the interviews, and somebody on our UFOs named Neopork did a Lou Elizondo detailed notes from various interviews, and I believe it's in there. And
hey, drop that link if you're able to, Jay. Drop it into the chat for the viewers, because that's a really cool link that you can go to and see all of Lou's detailed notes. That's pretty cool to reference.
And for the record, I think he's actually added more to it. Did it? It's posting on every platform. That's why. Okay, cool.
Hey,
no, good.
Information's good.
Yeah, it's like I was like, why is it adding it so many times? Anyways, I apparently can't add it to the Facebook one for some reason, or it won't add it. Whatever, an error occurred. But anyways, yeah. So like, there's these stories that you hear that are just like wild, and that's where, and when you hear that, you're like, whoa, it's almost like shocking. And you hear it from somebody who was from the government, and somebody who appears to be completely trustworthy in this, and has the best intentions at heart. Even, I don't think he's made any huge mistakes, but whatever. It seems like he has the best interest of the community or the world at heart. And so when you put that all together, it's like wild. And you start to go like, what is the responsibility of something like Star Wars when you're a Star Wars creator? Do you have a responsibility to start to help people embrace these ideas?
I believe they know that already. Yeah. And I think they're doing that right now with inclusion, right, and storytelling. And I think they're addressing the hard topics that we're facing as a culture and a society today. They're doing already. They're including these into the stories. And if you notice, some of the older fans are pushing back because what? It's new, right? It's hard to wrap my head around. But they, who are responsible for the storytelling now, know that Star Wars is a very powerful tool to change the way people in a society of, humanity think, because it reaches so many. They can definitely put those messages of positivity, inclusion, acceptance, diversity, all in that story, to where that's just one more drop in the bucket towards the goal of filling it. Right.
And that's where you go, like, so, how do you start to deal with interdimensional beings? And I'm like, well, that Ahsoka show is going to have some wild stuff, because like when you look at the Ahsoka show,
is that it
has that star map, that weird concept. And I'm not a huge fan of time travel being used to fix wacky or poor storytelling, or even when it's used as a device in a non-time travel place to mess with things. But when you get down to it, like using that kind of stuff, like when you're like, okay, light speed's possible, like, well, interdimensional wormholes and using things like that is completely on the table. And
so, as I will say something controversial, okay?
Sure.
I will say it. I'm a fan of doing just that with storytelling, because I know as a storyteller, there are things, that I'm going to slip up and not think of at the moment, or want to include but can't because I've already committed to certain aspects of the story. And I'm a fan, at least growing up with sci-fi and fantasy, right, and all these things, of using time travel in some kind of way to do exactly that, to right the wrongs of possibly what has grown beyond my original vision, right?
Right.
I'm a fan of it. So I know people take it like you said, like, I think it's a, fixing piss poor stories and kind of making more sense with time travel. And it's kind of a crutch, but guess what? It's one of those tropes that worked for me. I love it. Like, when I see it in the story, I'm like, all right, I'm on board. Like, I pay attention.
I believe that this Waldron dude who's writing the Feige movie, I mean, he's rocked it. He's rocked everything he's done. Everything he's done, I know of. I am a fan of now, and so I am a little bit more. And he's not writing the Ahsoka thing, but I am a little bit more like, oh, and by the way, somebody's all give us the goods on Ahsoka. It hasn't started filming yet, so there's not really much to say until it's in production.
I think they're going to, by the way, correct her laikus. That's what they're called, right?
Yeah.
I think they're going to fix them and make them longer through possibly cutting them off here and
Yeah.
having like the green little nubs and then digitally adding them. And then I believe because it's on Disney Plus, right? We can do this. They're going to go back and I think correct it on the
other one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I predict this. This is my prediction.
Yeah.
For the
Well,
Making
and
Star Wars show.
it's one of those things where I get where they would want to shorten them because she's going to need to be agile.
I just don't
stuff
think
like
they
that,
thought of that, to be honest with you. I don't think they thought about
Hmm.
that, or maybe didn't include it in the original budget request. I don't know.
I don't know, because it's like they're so long and
It's an easy fix. It's an easy fix, man.
Yeah.
Like, they could do it. But
Yeah. If enough people care, I think it'll change. But who knows?
they do. It's Ahsoka. They care.
Right.
You see online, they care. Man, they care.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, we are coming on the a 2-hour point here, and I would love to talk about UFOs with you again whenever you're down. I had a
blast, man. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me on.
Yeah,
You know,
dude, it was a
I'm
great
down to do this
conversation.
anytime you want. This
Yeah,
is
no,
fun.
I'm down to like this time we were just a bit like anything goes, and we were just kind of getting it all out.
Yeah,
But
we had to get it out, folks. We had to release this just flow of kind of frustrated information is what it was.
Yeah, it's just like you want to go up to one of your friends on the street, just go, "Hey, everybody, listen to this," and they're just like, "Whoa, enough!" All right, but yeah, we could. I mean, Lou Elizondo said the next 7 days could be interesting, so maybe we'll have a reason to get back together soon and discuss what that is.
If you have me back on, I would like to talk about something crazy sounding.
Okay.
But an interesting book nonetheless. It's called Walking Amongst Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity by Dr. David M. Jacobs.
Okay.
Interesting stuff. And we'll talk about the possible alien agenda.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, yeah, and I haven't read the book. So with that in mind, it won't be a book club episode, which would be interesting because you'll be able to tell me what's going on, and I'll be able to react to that and question you. Yeah, so yeah, me and you'll talk this week, and we'll see if something like really soon comes. We could get together and we'll talk about that, because that sounds fascinating. And and it doesn't mean, for the record, that this isn't a Star Wars show still. And by the way, if you ever want to talk about Star Wars stuff, we'll talk about Star Wars stuff too. But yeah, it'll that is fun, and I'm obsessed. I was telling you, I think before we started, right now UFOs for me, the excitement is there for it, like before The Force Awakens was for Star Wars, like,
right?
And it's like,
it's an important part of our history. Honestly, we'll look back on this and go, I remember that exact moment.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I remember what was going on in social media. I remember all these things, and it's going to lead up to something, hopefully more.
And it might be fun human history and not bad human history, like we are sometimes have to endure.
Yeah.
And Rick Jones says, "May the Force be with you, and may the Force be with you, Rick." And thanks for coming on, Jason. And we will do this again very, very soon, I hope. And I'll talk to you this week about getting together and doing something.
All right.
else.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And so everyone, I am going to play the show ending that I love, but I am such an old man, I have to find it. There it is. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good night.
It's not about spaceships. It's not about